Hey everybody, Ian Bremmer here, and set against the war in Iran, the war in Ukraine, not as much being discussed in Asia and specifically around China and how the Chinese are playing all of this. We know the one thing they're not doing is thinking about invading Taiwan in the near term. And lots of reasons for that. The American military is showing itself as extremely capable. Xi Jinping is much more risk averse. He's playing the long game while the Americans are thinking more short term. The Russians are thinking more short term. Um, all of this is to say that Taiwan looks pretty stable for now, and hard to imagine the Chinese making a big move on it anytime soon. But what they are thinking about is maybe changing the nature of the rules with the American president. And I think this is pretty interesting. Summit that has been delayed between Xi Jinping and Trump once now because of the ongoing U.S. war in Iran. But the Americans and the Chinese have both handled it in a very favorable fashion. It's not about the importance of the relationship. It's not in any way to cast aspersions. Both sides respect and like each other. They want stability. Obviously, the Chinese aren't happy about what the U.S. is doing in Iran, but Xi Jinping is saying nothing negative about Trump himself at all, just calling for peace and all the rest. Assuming that the ceasefire holds, even if the strait is still disrupted, as long as war doesn't suddenly break out in a big way again, it is reasonably likely that in a few weeks' time, Trump will be on a plane and heading over to Beijing to meet with Xi Jinping. And he will be very, very warmly received with lots of pomp and circumstance and a big US delegation with CEOs and billionaires and some overlap between the two on the plane and to announce a deal. What is that deal going to be? Because there hasn't been that much preparatory work in advance. Usually there is. Usually exactly what the two sides are going to agree to is well known in advance. There'd been some talk about maybe the United States opening up for investment from Chinese corporations, maybe building some battery plants or electric vehicle plants, but there's been a lot of pushback from US industry saying don't want that. I think that's been softer. It's been more cold feet, unlikely to see that announcement. There could be reductions in tariffs on the fentanyl side, where the Chinese are providing some level of support and transparency and cracking down on labs and trying to know who your customer is. And that could create some movement. There's a board of trade that's being put together that could maybe lead to more trade in non-strategic sectors. But none of this is big, big, big. Big, big, big would be movement on Taiwan. And that is, of course, what the Chinese really want. After China had told the Japanese that defending Taiwan was unacceptable and cut off all the Chinese tourism and stopped buying Japanese seafood and lots of other economic consequences. And Trump had told the Japanese prime minister, calm it down on Taiwan. We're not publicly defending you on that position. The Americans are going to be selling huge amounts of weapon systems to Taiwan, and then Trump is willing to engage and talk about the nature of those systems with Xi Jinping before it finally goes through. So there's been a lot of friendly noise, though policy has not changed between the US and China. What the Chinese are looking for is for the Americans to change the status quo, for the Americans to say that they reject decisively an independent Taiwan. In other words, change decades of stated policy, Democrats and Republicans, of strategic ambiguity of what America's policy actually is as to the status of Taiwanese sovereignty, territorial integrity, and ultimate status of a one-state policy between China and Taiwan. And none of the hawks around Trump, whether it's in the intelligence agencies or whether it's in defense, whether it's in state and the White House, these are all people, the Treasury Department, Commerce, these are all people that want to ensure that Taiwan continues to get American security guarantees and support. And yet, none of them think that they know what Trump would say if Xi Jinping brings this up to Trump directly. And this is a hugely important issue for Xi. He'd be willing to offer a lot to the Americans in return, billions and billions of dollars of purchasing American soybeans and ag and aircraft and plenty of other stuff. There'd be goodies on display. And she's already made good in allowing the Americans to take TikTok, which matters for Trump algorithmically, going forward for elections. So they've built goodwill with Trump individually. And they know that Trump doesn't care that much about a territory that is thousands of miles away, just like he doesn't care about Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine's a sovereign country invaded illegally by Russia, and Trump doesn't care. Trump's view is that's for the Europeans to deal with. I don't need to provide that support. And in fact, he frequently blames Ukraine as much for the war as he blames Putin. So if that's his position there, why wouldn't he give his buddy, Xi Jinping, the opportunity to make a historic deal on Taiwan? And this was yet one more war that Trump would say he's ended, just like Israel-Lebanon, for example, which he's been talking with foreign leaders about over the last several days. I guess that's the 9th war he believes that he's ended. So this could be number 10 or 11 if Iran is over a second time by then. And I got to say, if you're Xi Jinping, it would be dereliction of duty not to give that a shot with Trump. American allies in Asia who need the United States a great deal, the Japanese, the South Koreans, American troops on the ground, part of the security umbrella, they're very, very careful not to criticize Trump, not to express anger about the hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars that privately I've heard they consider blackmail and extortion, super unhappy about, but you can't say that with Trump. What would they do if Trump suddenly said, not my problem, Taiwan? Would the Japanese change their policy? Would South Korea? And I think probably not all that much. And Xi Jinping has to know that they aren't in a very good position. So I think there is something to really watch in the upcoming summit between Trump and Xi. And it's when Xi makes that direct ask of his trusted friend, Trump, after all of the military flyovers and the extraordinary displays of soldiers and robotics and dancers and celebration, and the Chinese celebrating Trump as they have not celebrated any other American president, and Trump feeling really good about that. When they offer him a deal on Taiwan, does he take it, irrespective of what everyone else around him is saying? And the answer is you just don't know. Xi Jinping certainly wants to find that out. That's it for me. We'll be watching it carefully in the coming weeks. Talk to you soon.